Hi, welcome back. It's now the beginning of May and it's a really hot day. In fact, it's far too hot to be in the potty tunnel today. So I'm going to be outside on the allotment doing a bit of gardening, and I thought you might like to join me. I've got a few different jobs to be doing, one of which is repotting these gorgeous Acers. I mean, how stunning is that foliage? They need potting up, weeding. That's one thing I need to do. I'm also going to revamp my herb bed because it's got a little bit scruffy and abandoned, and I'm going to try and do a little bit of specialist sort of pruning on my bay tree to make a new feature out of it and to improve the growing conditions of everything else in that bed. So yes, thought you might like to join me. We might spread this out throughout the week. I'll see how I feel. But to start with, I'm down here in my seating area right at the corner of my plot, where I've got my ginkgo tree that's coming out into leaf now, and the leaves are that zesty lime colour and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And the trellis behind, which has been here for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's meant to disguise my compost bins and rubbish at the back, you know. I've got a climbing rose right behind me, then there's a clematis that will flower in about July, then we've got this gorgeous honeysuckle, and then a great big gap which has been bothering me for a while. And I did have a evergreen clematis down in that corner, and it was a winter flowering one, but it died. It's not hardy past sort of -4, and we had a cold winter. We've had a number of cold spells in previous winters and it's killed it off. So I've actually got another small honeysuckle to pop there because this one does so well. It's part shade, you know, it's facing northeast, so it only gets a bit of the morning sun and it just romps away. So I'm just going to plant another one in that corner to fill that gap in time, and then yeah, full screening in the summertime and you won't be able to see down there at all. So I'm going to get that in the ground now. I'm not actually too sure which variety this one is, as it was off the cheap shelf, but it's got so much lovely new growth on it. It's going to do really well. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to plant it on your side of the fence because there's a lot going on there. I think I'm actually going to train it from the back through that side, which is what this one is actually. That one's planted on the back side. And they don't mind a bit of part shade, the honeysuckle family. And the soil here is actually surprisingly damp. I thought it'd be far too dry because obviously it competes with moisture with the tree that's above it. So I'm just digging about a spade's depth, quite deep. Ooh. Look at all those great roots. Just going to give it a bit of a tickle. It looks a little bit pot bound. And then we go. Give it a good firming in with my foot. And that's now angled towards the fence line. And very quickly, this should hopefully fill and cover it entirely. Just needs a bit of water and that's it. So I've now got these lovely Acers to pot up. I've also got my lemon tree and my lime tree to pot up as well. First I'm just going to give them a bit of a weed because we don't want to encourage them to grow anymore. Now the pots that I'm putting these into are going to be just a standard sort of 10 litre black pot, similar to what they're in already, because I don't have that many fancy decorative pots. They are quite expensive, and one day I may end up moving these to a permanent position in a proper garden in a home, but that might not happen for a while. So for now they're going to go into some 10 litre pots just to keep them happier, because these are the pots that they came in. So I've got here some ericaceous compost, and that's because Acers are part of the acidic loving soil family, same as rhododendrons, azaleas, that sort of thing. So I'm going to mix some of this up into my tub and get ready to plant them. I've also got here a bit of vermiculite, sorry, not vermiculite, perlite, just to add to the mix, add a bit of aeration and drainage, because they're going to be in these pots for some time now, and I don't really want them to get cloggy and full of heavy soil that doesn't drain. Now this variety of Acer is called Acer Sangu Kaki, I believe. One of the reasons I love it so much is because not only do you get that gorgeous apricot, orangey green, lime coloured foliage, but you also get the red of the stem. So in the winter time, you've still got a bit of interest because of that bright red orange kind of colour. I'm just going to fill the bottom third, and obviously we don't want to be planting it lower or much lower than this line here. And we're going up just by about an inch in diameter on the plant. Firm it down. Now I'm going to get all that compost around those sides. Whoops. And repotting it also helps give it a nice boost of that acidity again that it loves. Because if it sits in the same pot of compost for too long, or in your soil that isn't acidic, it might start to decline a little or not put on as much growth. What a gorgeous spread of foliage on this one. But yes, I don't want to be watering those 5-litre pots constantly in the summertime. So this will really help to keep that moisture level right as the season warms up. This one had actually lost quite a bit of compost from the top. You can see some of the roots, and that's quite a popular thing in bonsai, is when the roots sort of protrude from the surface of the soil and give it even more character. But that's not what I'm going for. I want a healthy Acer. There we are. They are now going to look so much happier for the repotting, and I can't wait to see how much more growth they put on this year. But I've also got something else to pot in that ericaceous compost, and that is my lemon tree, which suffered a little bit. That dog! It did suffer a little bit over the winter that we had, but I'm pleased to see that it looks like it's making a recovery. Let me go get it and show you. Now, unfortunately, I had a few technical problems with the sound in this segment, so I'm giving you a voiceover of what I'm talking about instead. So I'm describing here about how cold it was in the winter just gone, and that my lemon tree has not fared very well. It's lost a lot of foliage, it's dying back, it's not looking very good, but it's still alive and it's got lots of new shoots and foliage that's appearing. So it's definitely still well and alive. But what I need to do, as I'm describing here, is to prune it back and take away all of that dead leaves and any dead stems back to where it's shooting, like this. So just pruning it back to all the nice, lovely new growth. I also need to pot up my lemon tree, and the potting mix that I'm using is a combination of the ericaceous compost with some topsoil, because lemons like slightly acidic, free draining soil that's a little bit loamy. Obviously you can just use a specialist citrus compost, but I didn't have any and I didn't have time to go get any, so I just made my own. I potted it up. My lime tree I also potted up, and that actually fared a lot better over the winter. And I'm also going to start giving them a regular feed. This is now the first of their summer feeds. I've now got a bit of planting out to do because my salads are ready to go in the ground. Although I'm not growing them in the ground this year, I'm going to grow them in containers like I did last year with my salad. It worked really, really well to be able to grow them in a pot. It was much easier to water them, kept the slugs away, and also I could move the pot into the shade throughout the really hot spell we had in summer. So it prevented them from bolting, like going to seed, as quickly. So I'm going to get some crops now out of the tunnel. Let's have a look. On the way though, look what I just spotted, my nigella that I planted out probably about a month or so ago, is starting to put on some flower buds. This is Love in a Mist, has beautiful foliage, but also the seed pods are really what I'm growing this for. Inside the tunnel, it's very hot in here today. Ooh, I've got some beetroot somewhere. Here they are, look. This whole tray of beetroot. Oh, there's some nasturtium there at the end. But I want these beetroot need planting out now. Let's have a look at their roots. Yeah, look at those, ready to grow on. And also, let's find the lettuce. Aha, here they are. Now these are all in really small little cells, and you really need to let them dry out a bit before you attempt to transplant them, because if they're quite wet, you can have a real hard time getting them out of these. Don't you just love to see a full whole tray of food that's going to keep you going for months? I do. So this bed here is where I'm going to be growing all of my salads this year, my peas, my potatoes. But as you can see, it's quite weedy, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to be growing it in pots, because this ground gets a lot of weeds, and it's a bit of a nuisance to weed when you're growing lettuce. Although interestingly, I've just spotted, do you remember the potato I planted in the ground as a test comparison against this potato in the pots? Well, it's shooting, so that's interesting. I also need to mulch the ones that are growing in the pots. Ooh. Now then, this bucket here had my tulips in it growing, but they got fire blight, so they didn't really bloom very well in the end because they've got this fungal disease that's in the soil. Now, although I can't use this soil mix for tulips again, because it could happen next year, I'm going to use it for my lettuce and my beetroot because it shouldn't affect them. Now, I'm going to reuse the compost that's in here, but I'm going to top it up with some fresh stuff on the top layer just to give it a bit more nutrients. You could also put a bit of chicken manure or bloodfish and bone into the mix just to give it a bit more of a boost if you're reusing old compost. For something like lettuce and beetroot, they're not very demanding in terms of nutrient, but lettuce do love a bit of nitrogen, which you can get in chicken manure, which I've actually run out of, but I'm going to get some more fresh compost. There we are, all topped up with a bit of peat-free compost that's already quite damp, fortunately, so that'll be easy to plant into. I appreciate this is a very big tub for what's just going to be salad crops, but I don't grow many things in containers this big, so beetroot love a mixture that's nice and loose that they can grow those beetroots into and swell up nice and large. So they should actually benefit from not being in the ground when that can, it is quite compacted under here. And I know they just get swarmed by the weeds. It wouldn't be so bad if I was growing something like squash, but yeah, I'm spacing them about 10-15 centimetres apart. I've got a few different varieties in here. We've got Lolo Rossa, curled oak, and I've lost the label. It's called something Simpson. I got it from a heritage seed talk. There we are, that's one salad tub, but I do have an example of one that I'm growing on a much smaller scale. This one here is where I took a load of my seedlings, and essentially it was when I was thinning them out, and I just planted a load into this, that might be a 15-litre container, and you can see I've got a lovely mixed bowl here of different salads that you can cut and come again. All you need to do is take the outside leaf and then let it grow on a little while, pluck off the outside leaves and then let it grow on a while. And this is probably what I'll do with the remainder of most of my lettuce, is just put them all together, doesn't matter how close, and let them grow on and just keep harvesting it. And then remembering to sow lettuce seeds probably once a month to give me a consistent supply right throughout summer and into autumn as well. I'm also planting some of the beetroot in this raised planter that I have. It's quite a sandy mix because it's where I grow my carrots every year, but this year I'm giving carrots a rest because I get carrot fly and I'm not going to need too many this year, and I just think I want to give the soil a rest from the carrots. So in here I've got some Senecio that I'm growing for the wedding as a foliage, and they like quite loose sandy soil. So I'm going to just see how the beetroot do in here. I've not grown them in here before. In theory, because it's quite an open structure, they should like it, but it may not be as well as holding on to, it may not be as good at holding on to moisture as my own soil. But I think it's just good to experiment with these things sometimes and see what works better and see if I get a different sort of crop. So I've got some of the golden beetroots and more of the Moulin Rouge going in here. So a mix of orange and purple. If I was growing carrots again, I'd definitely use a nematodes to drench the soil and get rid of any overwintering carrot fly larvae, because that's how it comes back year after year, even if you net it. And I've really not found that any of the companion plants works to ward them off. You know, you can plant onions, leeks, some people suggest, and yeah, I just don't find that it's good enough. I find you got to use nematodes and a net. That's the best way to prevent it. Well, there we go. Filled it up with lots of beetroot and lettuce as well now. So I've got a bit of a salad bed slash foliage bed this year, which will be fun to see how it does. Okay, so it's now a different day and I'm going to tackle this herb bed that's by my gate. And I couldn't do it the other day because it started to get a little bit noisy on the allotment and my neighbours were close by and I didn't want to disturb them by doing it. But also, look above me, my hawthorn tree is in full bloom, and what has been a rather rainy afternoon has turned out to be a rather glorious afternoon. Now, this herb bed has been a little bit forgotten about and abandoned, and it needs a little bit of TLC, which is what I'm going to do now. And also I'm going to do some rather, I don't want to say unusual pruning, but I'm going to tackle this bay tree. So we've got this buddleia here that I usually cut back really hard, but I've actually left it quite tall this time because it gives me some privacy. I don't know if my neighbours realised how low they cut their hedge, but it doesn't give me much privacy on this area here. So I'm going to let this bay grow just to give me a little bit more privacy. But can you see how much it's grown at the bottom as well? And I've got a plan. I'm going to cut all of these side shoots underneath really close back to the stem so that we end up with a parachute style plant. So it will mean that a lot more light can get below, but I'll still have lots of bay on the top. And also I need to tidy up down here. I've got that marjoram that's starting to grow, but we've got all the old growth under here from last year that needs cutting back, prevent the slugs. And then I've got a rosemary bush right back here that's very old and woody. It's flowering, but I just need to give it a bit of a trim. And also the sage, I've got a sage down here, look. And I don't really use sage that much. And that's gone horribly woody and strangly. I mean, look at that. Because the bay is kind of taking over this spot. So first things first, tackle the bay. So I'm going to start from the bottom. See, we've even got brambles down here. It's no wonder I don't harvest my herbs enough when I've got these grabbing out for me. Just going to trim them for now. Oh my gosh, the smell of this bay is so strong. Do love it in a casserole. And I've got to decide first things first where I want the foliage to start, and I think it's going to be there, which means anything below is now coming right back to the main trunk, which is going to give me a lot of material for drying and using at home. You can come back. See, already this is giving me so much more light down here. I'm just working right up to the trunk. Take out a bit more of this bramble. Ouch! Oh, the smell of that hawthorn. I mean, a lot of people hate it. Say it smells like cat wee. I don't dislike it. It's not an amazing smell, but it's just one of those smells of spring, you know? Now, I don't want to cut too much of the bramble because these do give me great blackberries in the autumn. I don't want that bit. The bay does sucker quite a bit from the base as well. I'm going to harvest some of this sage. I don't really know if I want to keep it anymore, but I'm going to clip it, take it home and dry it. But this herb bed is probably a longer project than what I anticipated. Well, that's got the main shape. How high do I bring a canopy? That's the question. Stand back and have a look. Yeah, I think that's actually about right. I've got a lot of rubbish underneath there, haven't I? Just needs trimming back a little bit. And now's actually a great time of the year to be pruning bay, especially if yours is flowered. You can prune it just after it's finished flowering. I'm just going to nip some of these shoots, and then what that will do is it will encourage more side shoots so that you actually end up with a bushier plant just by giving it a very light tip prune like this. But you can see all that new growth at the top, which indicates it's in active growth. Bay is one of those that over in this side of the world you don't really want to be cutting in the winter time because that open wound can get the cold in and it can really suffer as a result of that, especially if it gets very cold. So I'm looking for generally a sort of round shape, but we're not going to be too formal about it because it is an allotment after all. How's it look? Yeah, we're getting there. Let's prune a little bit more off here. And yeah, you can prune this quite hard if you want to. But as I say, I do kind of need a bit more growth at the top there just to give me a little bit more privacy. I'm going to cut that one a bit further. Perhaps you in a bit more. Now, as for the marjoram, it's just a case of pruning back all of last year's old woody growth, and you know it's last year because it's resting on the floor and it's all brown. It's not like this lovely new growth in the middle. Unlike bay, marjoram is not evergreen, so I've got all of that to pull out and get into the compost bin. Lots of brown matter down here, and I want the light to get in, but I won't be mulching the soil because herbs typically like, apart from mint, dry and not very nutritious or rich soil. If you think of your Mediterranean herbs like rosemary, lavender, they just want it nice and free draining, not too heavy, and sandy, free draining. Ooh. So yeah, I don't really do anything at all to this bed, as you can tell. Oh, bit of wire in there. That's no good, what's that? I do want to be able to see the soil. Whew. But I've also got to be somewhere and leave in 5 minutes. Oh dear. Give it a rough tidy for today, eh? How beautiful are those little flowers? They look great on cakes and any other things as a little decorative garnish. Beautiful. Well, I've just realised the time and I've actually got to be somewhere, so I might finish this up for this episode. I know that the next one is going to be an epic planting out session, so do join me for that one, especially if you're interested in my wedding flower series. Let's have a little look at the bay tree and herb bed before we go. So if you just ignore the hose and the compost bag, but you've got some nice clear stems there now on my bay to give it this parachute effect, where that's the big canopy and the strings of the parachute. I have kept some of the sage and I've just given it a little bit of a light tidy down there with the marjoram that's coming up, and I've hard pruned the rosemary so we get a little bit more light that filters down there to the other herbs. And this is about to bush out in even more new growth. Look at all the beautiful herbs I get to take home today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!